welcome back to the stream. Whoever is going to watch this now or later. Uh, I'm Patrick. Here is Austin. This is the Chill Film Discussion, episode 17. And today's film that we are discussing, rather chill-like, that's not a word, is called Missing Link. Missing Link. And we have some quick facts from Wikipedia for those of you who don't know about this movie. Actually, if you don't know about this movie, well, I mean, there's going to be spoilers, but whatever. It's just an intro. Missing Link is a 2019 American stop-motion animated adventure comedy film written and directed by Chris Butler. It is produced by Laika, who is actually a production studio that that has made some pretty interesting, pretty nice films from before. Like one of which is Kubo and the Two Strings. I've seen that one. Anyway, they're known for its stop motion animation. That's their spiel.
Right.
And it features the voices of Hugh Jackman, aka Wolverine, Zoe Saldana, aka Gamora, the MCU, David Williams, who I actually don't. I'm sorry, David. I don't really know what roles you played. Let's see. Wow, there's a lot. Stephen Fry, Matt Lucas, Timothy Olyphant, Amrita Acharya, and Emma Thompson, and Zach Galifianakis. I butchered his name probably, but oh well. The plot follows a Sasquatch who, with the help of an English explorer, Sir Lionel Frost, travels to the Himalayas to meet his Yeti cousins. That is the premise of the film. That is the sort of where the facts surrounding the film. And yeah, we can just go straight into it and start talking about it. Austin, what are your initial thoughts of this film?
Yeah, I mean, this is it's an animated stop motion, right? So it's definitely aimed towards, I think, a younger target audience, right? And it's definitely for general family viewing, right? Fun for the whole family. And it definitely shows, right? I think some things are, definitely skews in terms of like how things are written and portrayed, but overall, it was all right. But there's elements of, I definitely think, where, bit slapstick and just, aim, I think just for kids. But, I really do appreciate the animation, the stop motion. Some of it, the scenery is really beautiful. I thought, how they kind of put that together. And, it's pretty impressive how, just how some of the scenery kind of came across, right, and how they just the sort of the backdrop, some of the establishing shots. Really enjoyed looking at that, and paired off with some of the music, kind of gave this kind of a enchanting kind of exotic feel because if you're where they're exploring different places of the world, it was just it kind of really they really build out the world through just the scenery that they have that's shown. But overall, a fun movie, but definitely I think geared towards, for the whole family to watch. Anyone who's like really, really younger, can appreciate and enjoy, and not kind of, nothing I think too complex came out from this film.
Yeah, yeah. I feel the same way. I think this film was pretty basic. The plot was pretty straightforward. I think the only complexity to this plot was like, maybe if you were just expecting Mr. Link, the Sasquatch character, to reunite with his Yeti, or not reunite, just like become incorporated into the Yeti Society, and then they part ways, and that's the end of the story. Like if you thought that was going to happen, then oh no, it didn't happen like that. Who would have thought? But yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for those of you who watch it and think it's going to go one way. No, but that's pretty much like, I think the only like plot twist related thing, the only thing that really like was quote unquote unexpected. And which personally for me, I knew it wasn't going to end like that simply. Like I was pretty sure they're going to end together because they that's what the whole film was building up toward, their like relationship.
Oh yeah.
So to me, it was very like bread and butter sort of plot. Like yeah. I mean, a journey. They
Right.
get closer. They meet at crossroads. They come out stronger together, and then they end up together. That's basic. Very textbook. And actually, in my opinion, but the thing that I was most impressed, and I didn't realize this until after I looked into it more, was that it was stop motion. I didn't
Yeah.
actually notice it was. I didn't when I first watched it. I was like, the animation was like, oh, that's cool, but I didn't realize that it was stop motion until I read about it, and I was like, oh, that's cooler. Yeah, it's more impressive for sure. The stop motion is pretty, at least seems very more technically challenging than like
Time consuming.
time consuming. Yeah, than other forms of animation.
Right.
But yeah, those are my first. Yeah, I mean, that's those are my first thoughts. It's just like it was pretty
standard, right?
standard. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the story I think is just simple enough, right? So this way everyone can kind of understand it, right? I don't think they wanted to make it too complex and too complicated, which I mean that makes sense, right? You're trying to, you're doing, for family viewing, but at other times I feel like you could probably, even if you're doing an anime story, for family friendly, I think you can make a story that's still enjoyable for all and still bake some complex elements that adults can kind of, grasp on to enjoy.
Yeah.
And I don't think that any of that was kind of here in this movie.
Yeah.
I think this was all just pretty simplistic.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, I mean, there's still themes and morals to the story that kind of kind of transcends all kind of all the stories that everyone can understand and know what's good and what's right. But yeah, the story itself was kind of simple. But again, as we said, paired off with the animation, I thought it was really nice. Like when the scene was in Washington, which I was like, it's kind of funny that they went all the way to Washington. I love the scene when they had like the backdrop of the forest. That was really cool and really neat. Mm-hmm. Every time they're like in the desert or traveling across the train, the scenery, the styling shots were always really nice and enjoyable. Mm-hmm. And the production value for that I thought was pretty great for just like an animated film. And mm-hmm. I really enjoyed that. But yeah, the story itself was just pretty simplistic because, as you said, they go to like Washington State, go to the woods to find it. They get find the have the baddie, the bounty hunter or whatever, tries to stop him, and he's kind of like almost comical, right? He has the mustache and is kind of bumbling. Then they go to Santa Ana in California, mm-hmm. and right, they meet the main romantic interest. Go all the way across the New York, go to Paris, then go to India and the Himalayas. Mm-hmm. So it's just like a travel film, go from place to place, and there's just like different things that humorous moments here and there, but I think probably more appreciative from a younger audience than an older audience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So do you have more to say?
No, I was gonna go on to the next topic. Like I think I really liked how the movie began in terms of like its introduction. Uh-huh. I think that for me that was probably the highest point. And then the rest of it, I was just like, okay, I mean, it's an animated movie. I mean, there are some points I liked here and there, but I think the beginning really kind of bought me in just because of how they introduced everything, right? I think it kind of a good way to how to introduce a movie. It's just like, okay, you have this guy who is Sir Lionel Frost, right, played by Hugh Jackman, mm-hmm. And he's he's kind of full of himself, right? He's kind of in his own world, doesn't care what's happening, everything else. And he has one main objective, which is to find these strange oddities, right? And we get to see that with his trying to, him and his assistant, right, picking up, trying to find evidence of the Loch Ness monster. So mm-hmm. I like how that movie was introduced. We get a glimpse of this character, of who he is and how his relationship with other people is, and we also get this feel like, oh, this will be like strange oddities because or monsters are real, right? Because we have the Loch Ness monster, and then the relationship breaking down between him and his assistant, just how he doesn't really care, and that will show his growth right later in the movie. Where at the beginning he doesn't really care about she only cares about himself and getting into the gentleman's club. or in the Revengers Club, and then later on, in the movie, he grows and he's more empathetic to everything. So I like how they introduced his character, just the whole premise of the movie, because I think it was a good job. And again, I love when he was underwater. It was kind of that was a beautifully shot scene, but yeah, the rest of it, I feel like once it got into the main plot of finding the Sasquatch, I thought that was pretty quick. He just got a letter and they got right into it. I mean, it's an adventure movie, so they had to go to different plot points pretty quickly. So I can see why they wanted to introduce it really quickly, but I just thought it just was a very fast switch from the Loch Ness monster to okay, now I gotta find the next monster. But yeah, I just really like the introduction because I thought it was a good way to just introduce us to the world. I just wish some parts were just a little bit better.
Yeah, I was gonna say that this actually, I was looking on Wikipedia, the production value. You mentioned something about the production value, and actually, this movie was a box office flop. Its budget was 102.3 million, and it only earned 26.2 million in box office. So it lost almost 80 million.
Oh wow!
But it has like, I don't know, the critics ranked it pretty well, or rated it pretty well, good decent ratings, and plus it's like won awards. I believe it won, yeah, it won the best animated feature film for the Golden Globes back in 2020, which was like last year. So it was well received by critics, but it did not perform very well in box office, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and
I mean, it's not from a big studio that a lot of people know, right?
right, but if you look at other video of films that Leica has made, like Kubo and the Two Strings, and let's see, there's other ones like Caroline, Paranorman, Box Trolls. Each of them at least netted positive. Yeah, this one just like flopped completely. It's fairly interesting.
They had a lot of big stars here, right? Zach Gallivan.
Yeah, they definitely had a lot.
Hugh Jackman, Zoe Saldana, Stephen Fry.
They had a lot of big stars, but the thing is, I think that a lot of people just probably like maybe some of them. I don't know. I mean, there's probably a reason behind it. I don't think. I think part of it is that there's not really much substance to this movie.
Yeah.
To begin with, like I think some people probably like went to the theater, watched it, and then they're probably like, yeah, it was an okay film, but they wouldn't necessarily recommend it. They weren't like talking about it to their friends, be like, oh yeah, you gotta watch this like new stop motion picture film. So I kind of agree with that, to be fair. That assessment, like I think the characters were very, for the most part, pretty one-dimensional. I mean, there is growth between the relationship of Mr. Link and Sir Lionel Frost. And Lionel Frost, I think, is the one who grows the most out of anyone in this film. Like, he's the one who develops the most. But to be fair, I mean, there is some growth with Mr. Link as well, because he sort of was like really looking forward to meeting his Yeti brethren, and then they kind of like reject him because he's too human, and then
is it because he's too human, or just because he's just different, not a Yeti?
I think it's just they from my implications, from what I've watched, it was because he was too ingrained with like human culture. So the Yetis associated him with the humans, which was why they rejected him. But I guess you also get a sense of like he's different because they called him redneck and whatnot. But
yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So sure, there's like that arc of like, oh, he wants to be with part of them, and then eventually they reject him, so he like no longer wants to be with them, and that's the same with Lionel Frost. Or Lionel Frost, he wants to be part of this gentleman's club, and no longer wants to be part of it because they don't deserve him.
Right, there's better things.
There's better things out there. So sure, that's like the most character growth that happens in this film. What's her name? The love interest, which I'm glad
Adelina.
Adelina, yeah, which I'm glad that at the end they didn't like her and Lionel Frost didn't get together. That was
Yeah.
nice. I really like that.
I actually really appreciated that fact too. I thought they were trying to go for it, but then I was like, throughout the movie, it's like they really shouldn't be together, right? Because she was the widow of his best friend, right?
Yeah.
And then they obviously show there's a attraction between the two, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or they both had a history, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there's also a lot of conflict between the two, right? There's not really a lot of moments that I mean, there's like one maybe here and there where like, oh, they're looking lovingly into each other's eyes, but for
Yeah.
the most part throughout the film, right, they're kind of always in conflict, fighting, and being aggressive to each other, conflicting with each other, right,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of how to go about things. He's trying to do something, and she was always disapproving of him.
Mm-hmm.
And she wanted to see him change. Now there could be, a future for them, like where she says, "Oh, you are a greater man now," but she definitely wants to find someone, or finds herself, find an adventure herself, be herself,
Mm-hmm.
and not rely on a man. But I think it was kind of at least for me evident that they really shouldn't be together, and I'm glad at the end of this movie at least that they did not come together, because it kind of made sense, because they're always they're always kind of fighting and never really kind of had any real moments to kind of reconcile and just
Mm-hmm.
agree on the fact. Because I think there's just moments where she tried to push him and change him, right, become his agent of change, but I don't think it ever amounted to having a relationship at the end. That would not have been a good payoff.
Yeah. She was like the impetus of change for Sir Lionel Frost. Kind of like showed him the error of his ways to like be closer and be less self absorbed as a person, and try to extend his acts to be more gracious toward Mr. Link. So I mean, but she was a static character for the most part. She didn't really change too much. And then all the villains were very one dimensional. Like it was like they were just bad guys with bad intentions. The most interesting thing that I thought that from the villains that I took away from the villains was the what's his name, Lord Piggott Dunsby. The dude who basically hires a bounty hunter, Willard Stink, to kill off Sir Lionel Frost. There was a line that he said, which I thought was the most like a very interesting line. Is that I don't want this something about change. He's like, yeah, this site is not was built on man, blah blah blah, does not need this change, blah blah blah. Otherwise, there won't be any room for people like me to exist, or something like that. I think there was something along those lines.
Yeah.
And I thought that quote was very interesting because it actually, like, I don't think it was intentional that they were doing this, but I think it was just more of like his, like, expressing his motivation in the sense of why he's doing what he's doing. But I found it very relevant to some extent to society in general, is that like why there's why a huge amount of people who are positioned in power do not want change, is because they're afraid that like once change happens they will lose that power to some extent. And so that was like interesting in the sense that like, oh yeah, I can now understand why there are people who kind of just want to stay and want to keep society as it is, because they're
rooted in their ways and traditions, and are kind of conservative, right? They don't want things to like advance, right? He was against evolution, against the idea that they're they evolved from apes and whatnot, right? He was just like, no, that can't be true. That's not right. And he wants to kind of spread his imperialist ways, right? Because these are adventurers. They go out and civilize barbarians, as they said, and he wants to continue doing that without having to believe that this kind of at least for him, this ridiculous idea that these monsters exist and that they come from apes, because he believes in the glory of man, right? Just that that they are the best and whatnot. But it was interesting to see at least a little bit I mentioned there. But yeah, it was the kind of, as you said, I think kind of wanted to mention like, yeah, he just wants to stop everything just because um, he's afraid of change.
Yep. Yep.
Right.
But yeah, that's about it for the
But,
villains. Like, I don't really.
but his name is kind of also a play, right? Like Piggott Dunsby is like a bigot, right? Piggott, bigot, I think, and then Dunsby,
Is it
he's a
dunce?
dunce,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
Yeah. Nice, good catch. But yeah, I mean that's all I've got to say about the characters for the most part. Like, most of them are pretty, not very complex. So
yeah, well, Susan Link, Bigfoot, right, or the Sasquatch, I thought definitely played a more comedic role, right?
yeah.
I feel like his role, he always took everything very literal, and I guess that's just a gag, right? Because sometimes he doesn't, most of the time he just does everything that the movie requires him to do to create some, like, I think, cheap laughs. And um, he was interesting. I feel like when they put him in the suit, it kind of reminded me like a kind of like a bear in a circus, just because it looked, it was a very funny image.
Yeah.
But a lot of his jokes, I feel are just like all or his whole character. He was supposed to be like a mascot that kind of play to the younger audience, just for for laughs. And everything he does is just for comedic effect, right?
Yeah.
Comparatively to the rest of them, the whole cast who was there, I think, just to try to give it a little bit more complexity, which probably wasn't as there as much.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
And then the main antagonists were was Lord Piggott Dunsby, but then the interaction mainly was the henchman, right, with Stink, right, because he was the one who was traveling around, and being the actual bad. But again, he didn't really have any dimension at all, right? He was just there to thwart, Lionel Frost, and wasn't really there to have any motivation or kind of stop, or he was only hired to kill.
Yeah. It became personal at the end.
At the end, right. He just let me try.
You're like too loosey goosey. Keep avoiding me, and I want to finish the duty or something.
Yeah.
I will say the last sequence on the ice bridge. There's something like so ridiculous about it, but like, do you know the part where Sir Lionel Frost is dangling by like one hand, and and he's literally lifting like 3 people's worth. I mean, more than 3 people, because not Yeti. Sorry, Mr. Link, the Sasquatch, is like probably weighs like, I don't know, like maybe
600 pounds. If this said
600 pounds. Okay, well that's like 3 times a human or something.
Yeah.
3 to 4 times a human. So like Mr. Link is. Not Mr. Link. Like Lionel Frost is literally lifting like 5 to 6 people's worth of weight, like with one hand on an ice bridge, like with no tension. I just found that scene so ridiculous. I was like, that's not realistic at all. There's no way that he's able to like lift that many people, to like keep that amount of weight just like on his fingertips on an icy bridge. That's just not. I just thought that was,
yeah. No, I felt the same when that scene was happening. I was like, how is this guy holding up everybody, right? And then they kind of switched between him and Stink. And then it's like I don't get how they were, as you said, like how they were to hold on to everyone, and it just like no one was really doing anything, like they're just hanging there. And,
right.
It's just like, especially when we saw how heavy, or told how heavy Susan Link was, I was just like, what was the point?
Right, exactly.
Like there's like, it was kind of unbelievable in that scene. I mean, they try to create like a dramatic tension there, right, with hanging on, could fall to your death, but it wasn't as believable, just because like how do you how can one guy hold up the weight of all these people,
right,
dangling off the edge of the cliff? But
I just thought it was just like so bizarre, and it took me out of reality and whatnot. So I, yep. But yeah, I mean, to be fair, I really don't have too much to say about this film. Like I watched it and then I kind of like didn't think too much after about it. Um, I did get. I mean, yeah, there wasn't much complexity to it. I mean, some of the shots were pretty beautiful. Like I did appreciate it more when I found out it was stop motion for sure, but I just didn't really. Yeah, it was one of those films that was like I sat there and I was like, yeah, okay, that's
It's
cool.
pretty simple, right? Like
It's very
from beginning to
simple.
end.
Um,
Um, yeah. Then let's talk about, I guess, how you improve this movie, or how would you make it better,
yeah, yeah,
or make it more complex, right? Or just because I think, again, like even though it's a, family oriented, right? I feel like it does not have to be simple, right? Just to be family oriented and whatnot, especially using this medium, right?
hmm
Stop motion, and they've made complex movies before, right? That's just right. Like they had Coraline, they had which was a bit darker, and Kubo and the Two Strings, right, which is well received. I think the story here could like definitely use some kind of injection to it.
yeah, yeah. I agree.
And because the only mystical moment here, right, was just like, oh, or fantastical moment here was just like, oh, there's a Sasquatch, monsters are real, right? But again, it was just about the change and growth between Lionel Frost and Susan, and even then, it was just more of an adventure movie, right? They just go from place to place,
Yeah,
and then they are stopped by Stink occasionally. And that's their main conflict that kind of progresses the story is when they run into the henchman Stink.
yeah.
Get thwarted. There's an adventure or an action sequence, and then they escape to the next scene, and then again back into the whole action sequence, escape, and from time to time.
Yeah, for sure. Like we could talk about the how to make this film more. Um, I guess we can add like a little bit of complexity to it. Sprinkle on some thought. Not thought. More dimensions. I'm sorry, more dimensions in this film. So the first thing I would do, I think, would basically I wouldn't make the villain one dimensional. Like I think I would make him somewhat of a like like he seems like a very gentleman character. Like when you first introduced him, you immediately know that he is like he doesn't have the greatest intentions. He's put in this this negative light. He's like all about like control and power and like imperialistic views and whatnot. But like if let's say you don't really have that introduction and sort of like he comes off as very like proper and very um like sort of like very much like a gentleman and he and Lionel Frost are at odds because of what Lionel Frost has previously done. There's this insinuation that Lionel Frost is not like the most noble of characters, right?
Right.
There's a lot of these like
Right.
news articles that like the Mr. Link was opening up, and he was like, don't believe everything you read on the news, blah blah blah. But I think they could have like opened up that relationship, be like, oh yeah, like we would like to introduce you to the Timeless Club, but because of your previous history, blah blah blah, you can't. But if you like to redeem yourself, then you can go off and like find evidence of this the Sasquatch or whatnot. So it's sort of like there's not really like immediately a main antagonist. It's just more of like, oh, there's a hero's calling, like a calling to action, if you will, like
Right.
a device that will call this person to action. Now, as the film progresses, they could sprinkle in because I do want the ending to sort of stay more or less the same, where like he does turn out to be like a bad guy,
The villain.
the
Right.
villain, but it's more like a surprise than like
Twist.
yeah, like a twist. Like it's but like throughout the film, you can pepper in these um, little tidbits of Pigott Dunsby or whatever his name is, of that he is actually the main bad guy, because you could like the whole like bounty hunter guy.
Yeah.
could still be there, right? But you just don't know who hired him. Like you don't know like why he's there. Like he's obviously targeting Sir Lionel Frost, but like you don't know who's the one who hired him until the very end, right?
Mm-hmm.
He reveals that it was I who hired blah 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 blah, and like maybe as like it's insinuated throughout the film, but it's more of like, oh shoot, wait, this guy's a bad guy. Like it could be like he's like dangling on the bridge, and the servant picking up Dempsey. He's like, I did this, I hired the dude, and then I don't know.
But then what would his motivation be, right? To be that evil guy, right? Because in the beginning you said that he would.
Yeah, he reveals his motivation at the end.
Okay.
He doesn't reveal.
He doesn't want to change.
He doesn't want to change. He wants to stay in power, right? But he comes off as a noble person. But in reality, he's actually internally like wants to stay in power. And then at the end, like it could be like the Yeti people help him. Help Mr. Link and his party, Sir Lionel Frost. And then the Piggott Dunsby falls to his death along with his other people. I'm kind of sad his accomplice died. Like he didn't really do much. Like he was
the assistant, right?
Yeah. He was a bystander in the whole thing. He ended up falling to his death. I was like, okay, well that's
it didn't feel deserved.
It didn't feel deserved at all. He would have survived in my book. In my mind, he would have survived. He was a bystander. He and Mr. Link could have shared a very fond like friendship. I think those two would have gone along just fine. And then, so yeah, that's sort of like how I would have changed the film. I think I would have focused a lot more on the villains. I think the villains needed I just didn't like how one-dimensional the villains were. It's like, oh, I'm the bad guy. And it's like, just you're waiting till the climax, and it's like, oh my god, the bad guy's here at just the right moment. It's just, yeah.
That's true.
Yeah,
the villains can really make or break, right, a story. And making them more complex and making them more interesting, and give at least the main character more agency to act upon the forces going against them.
Yeah. Because like you don't need to introduce them. Like there doesn't need to be a well-established antagonist necessarily in a film, as long as the protagonist has a calling to action. As long as there is a motivation for the protagonist to do something. Like, it doesn't have to be like a very one-dimensional antagonist being like, oh yeah, this is like, I'm the bad guy, and like blah blah blah. Like because the audience already kind of like knows the full story from the very get-go, and it's like it's not like as the journey unfolds, it's harder to care when you kind of know as the audience what's going to happen, because it's easier to care when you're basically on the same journey as the protagonist. Like you're like trying to uncover what's happening. We don't know why this bounty hunter is after us. What's going on? And like as that adventure happens, the relationship, of course, between the Mr. Link and Sir Lionel Frost, improves, becomes better. That's fine. I think that ending is good. I think the ending between them, like him becoming an assistant to Sir Lionel Frost, like Mr. Link, and of course Adeline going on her own way, that was perfectly okay for like the protagonists.
Yeah.
But the antagonist, just like, that's one side of the story, but like unveiling the whole second side of the story in the very beginning just makes me feel like it's like oh yeah, I already know the beginning, I know the end, and it's just flipping pages to like get to that end. Like
right.
Yeah. And I think maybe in a different way, like you could have it like there are stories where like beginning and end are known and it's all about the journey. Right. But like this one just didn't really make me feel too much, because there wasn't too much tribulation, there wasn't too much adventure. Almost like, even though it was about adventure, there wasn't too much like stuff going on between to make me really like invest in the characters. Like for instance, if we talk about a story where, and I keep going on and on because I have a lot to talk about, like how to make this film better. But anyway, we talk about the known beginning and end of a story, and like the journey, the hero's journey in between. If you talk about like a story that did a story that did a really good job of this, is Avatar: The Last Airbender. Like the beginning is known, the ending, you know who the bad guy's going to be, you know who the protagonist is going to be, but that journey of all the characters and the relationships and that time that you put into it and developing, like getting to understand all these relationships, all these characters, their own subplots, their own trials and tribulations, it felt rewarded. And it felt like it was very genuine, natural, rewarded, and like in the end you cared. You
Right.
cared about that journey. So like it's just this movie just didn't either invest enough time or invest enough like character
Maybe.
moments to like
Yeah.
really make it feel genuine, because a lot of it was also just like transition. Oh, we're going from point A to point B by this drawing of a line on a map. It's like,
Yeah. Literally.
like quite literally, yeah. So it just
Yeah.
didn't feel. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't feel invested to their journey as much. So like,
Yeah.
yeah, the film would have been better if if it was like the ending wasn't necessarily known as
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I feel like there are moments sprinkled in where it kind of show these short character moments, but they're kind of a few in between. They're very short, right? Where Sir Lionel is kind of like moping around, or you have Susan Link where there's just he's just like kind of also moping, just not being alone, and then you have Adelina trying to push them together.
Mm-hmm.
But those are very kind of again one dimensional, like, oh yeah, they're alone. You should work to help them feel accepted and whatnot. But I agree. I think it would definitely have been better to provide more moments where they can connect and have it was just again point from point A to point B. I would personally, I think I would have probably changed the whole premise and focus of the movie itself, in terms of trying to see maybe it be a movie about forgiveness, redemption, and acceptance. I think you could have had a whole story about the widow, right? Or not the widow herself, but in terms of her husband, right? Because he apparently Sir Lionel Frost, right, went on an adventure with him, and they died. He died in an adventure, right? Like and they never came back.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be interesting to see if this could be a movie where maybe the main villain is was a good friend and doing this out of vengeance. He's trying to go after Lionel Frost because now he's going to another adventure, and he just wants to get back at him.
Wait, you think that so the main villain would change? Like the main villain would be the woman?
No, the main villain I think can still be Lord Piggott Dunsby, right?
Yeah.
But his motivation is different, right? Just not to be like conservative and being like, oh, like I don't want things to change. His motivation now is just to for vengeance again, just to get back at Lionel Frost for the death of the widow's friend. But the widow, there's two dimensions. One guy who's trying to get back at it, and the widow is just going to form acceptance. And like her husband is now dead. She was grieving before, but now she's accepting that he's gone. He's passed away. It's time to move on. Have her own adventure at the end, right? To move on, not to get together with Lionel Frost, but to accept that her husband's dead. And then no, it's not really. Maybe Lionel Frost reveals how the husband has died, and tries to get closure on that. So make it a more complex movie by having this more complex topic of like a death of a friend and how people react to it. One guy maybe reacts more aggressively, right? That could be Lord Piggott Dunsby. Instead of him, his motivation is just more aggressive, like I lost a very good friend, or maybe all three were good friends, right? But he's now angry at what Lionel Frost did. No one really knows the true story except Lionel Frost, and maybe there's kind of reconciliation. And maybe Susan, Sasquatch, helps bring about this change, right? Acceptance and whatnot. Maybe brings a kind of revelation to Lionel Frost to accept what he has done, and then everyone else can, follow suit. There's a change in the character, right? Acceptance. Because I think, there was, the point, that she's angry, or she misses her husband. She loved her husband, but there's her history.
Yeah.
So having that complexity, I think, could definitely have made this movie a lot more like, oh wow, this is moving, right? And still make it a kids movie, not be too complex about like death and whatnot, but just still make it a little bit more complex about the themes and whatnot. For people to accept, oh, this is change, a more mature theme of just forgiveness or acceptance of people who have passed away and how other people react to it.
Okay.
I think they could have done that, and it would have changed, I think, the movie a lot. But I think it would have made everyone a little bit more complex, especially the villain, right? Just how his motivation, right? His motivation will no longer be just like, oh, I want to continue on my traditional ways and being an adventure club. He's just like, oh, I want just, his reaction was just more aggressive because of a good friend he knows passed away, and he blames Lionel Frost for that.
Yeah.
So I think it would have been greater to change the motivations of everything, just the whole theme, because this theme of the movie is just like kind of just acceptance of like the other,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, that's fine. I mean, that makes sense, right? Because you have someone who's like not human. It's kind of like The Shape of Water we watched last week, right? You have
Mm-hmm.
the theme of like otherness, right? But it wasn't really touched upon. It was from here and there. I think it'd be more complex. Because just to show about like people passing and our grieving process, and then having Susan or the Bigfoot Sasquatch kind of be kind of naive, right?
Okay.
And be like, oh yeah, what is maybe not like what is death, but just like what happened, like what is this, and they maybe impart their own wisdom of how to accept death and how because he lost everybody in his family, right? Or he was alone, right? And he was just everyone has presumably died off, right? So maybe he can impart some wisdom of how he kind of went through it and how he forged ahead.
Okay.
So
basically,
I think it would have been.
Oh, sorry. Go. Yeah, I didn't interrupt you.
Yeah, so I would have just changed the whole like theme and moral of the story, and just have each character's motivation be very, very different in terms of how. I mean, Lionel Frost can still be trying to go adventure, but he has this baggage over him, and then every character he interacts with kind of is based off of what his past adventure with the widow's husband, Adelina's husband.
So basically, would you keep the story the same but change just the motivation of the antagonist?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think I would, yeah, and then that would also change different character moments, right? Because then you have people trying to, how to, accept, death, and maybe looking back on what they were doing, and how do people explain, like, oh yeah, I felt that, like, this because of this, and then probably, I guess Sting could still be there, be still as hired a thug, right? Because Lord Pickett doesn't want to get his own hands dirty. He hires someone else to do it.
Yeah.
But it's revealed at the end, as you said, like he comes by. Maybe we can have like the whole twist, but but at the end he reveals like he was really angry. He's still angry and doesn't want to do it. Maybe he doesn't even have to die at the end. He just just be defeated and whatnot. But I think I just so he can still be an adventure movie, still being have the thug kind of chase them around.
Yeah,
but just again, motivations be different, and we have different character moments. And I think those character moments can be very touching, especially at the end once we reveal people. Maybe Adelina accept like, yeah, my husband's gone, or even Lionel Frost accept like maybe it's not my fault what happened. Just this connection between him and the Sasquatch or with Susan.
Mm-hmm.
I think could have been a more profound moment than all we've had.
Mm. Yeah.
It definitely would have been a different story, but like I think it can still have been more mature, but still oriented to a family premise, right? Because I mean, it'll be maybe too complex for kids to understand, but I think for adults can then appreciate it, right? Kids can still appreciate the antics of Susan and just this animation and just an adventure and an action.
Yeah.
But the adults can say, oh wow, this is like pretty profound and touching.
That's a good I like your suggestion. The motivation of Pickett Dunsby was a good friend of the dude Adelina's former husband who passed away, and he wants revenge. Like that's actually a pretty good motivation. Then he goes to the extreme to try to like end Sir Lionel Frost because of he's seeking revenge, but then it ultimately comes to acceptance. Yeah, that's a good. I like that. I still want it to be like revealed at the end. Like I don't want it to be like all laid out in the beginning. But
that's true. You can do that, right? You can just say like, "Oh yeah, my good friend has passed away."
Yeah, at the very end, like he has that monologue. His monologue.
He had monologue. Like I can't believe you did this, and you still think it's okay. You still go adventuring, right? What happened? You've never done this. Blah blah blah.
Well, he's dangling from the ice. Everyone's waiting. Yeah. Okay. All right. I got it. Picture end scene done. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, that's a good point. I like that motivation a lot more than the standard like, oh yeah, I'm imperialistic, blah blah blah, conservative, want to keep it the old way.
It's more character, right? Defining it more personal, right? Because we understand his motivation then, right? Like like what would you do? Like it's understandable that he would do this for a really good friend who has passed away, or who he blames someone else.
Yeah.
For doing that.
Wow. That's yep. I agree. Studios hire us. We can change. We can make your stories better. I'm just kidding.
Script
yeah.
I don't know if I can change the dialogue, but I can change the story, the concept itself.
Right. Yeah. That's the initial idea, right? That's what changes, and then you get into the details. Something else I actually was thinking about that I could change. I might want to change is in the very beginning, Sir Lionel Frost kind of like saves his accomplice from getting
Mhm.
eaten. You know, he didn't have to save him. It's
That
true.
yeah.
That's a flaw. You're like, wait, this is the main dude. He seems like doesn't seem that great. He's very self-centered. Like he just
But
cares.
then wouldn't that be kind of irredeemable? Because then you let someone die. It's like, oh, do I really want to root for this guy anymore? If he doesn't save him. That's
Yeah,
pretty brutal.
but it makes him like starts him off much lower. Because he willingly dove in to go save him, right? Whereas
Right.
like he got eaten and then he could have been like, oh, this photo looks good, and they could have like rode away. But then like the monster comes back and slaps the boat, and then the picture's ruined. And he's like, oh. Um, but then you're like, oh my god, this guy's like very self-centered. You already know his flaws. You're like, dang, this guy sucks.
Yeah.
And then I have to watch this dude. But then maybe um he comes to like that's his character progression. But I do agree, maybe like it might be extreme, like almost irredeemable if he just lets someone die. But like it also puts him on a
Yeah.
much lower spot, meaning that he has a lot more room to grow.
I mean,
So
I think, yeah, I think that would be too much. I really feel like if he left him to die, it would be irredeemable at that point. If the assistant somehow came out of it by himself, right? So if he
yeah,
let him die, that's fine. Like he was just like, but then the assistant came back, like, yeah, I can't believe you just let me do, fend for myself. Maybe that because like death is the kind of permanent thing, and if they show that, like everyone would be like, oh my gosh, like did he really just let him like go and just like it also seemed kind of undeserving, right? Because like in this person kind of has was perished. And it's
yeah.
like it's all because of his actions. I don't think it
Right.
would have been
But
very
like he
relatable
didn't have to
anymore.
like necessarily let him like he could have like when he got eaten, the Loch Ness monster ate him. Like Iron Frost didn't have to like go head first. He could have just been like he could have been like on the boat like look he looks really worried and he's trying to like find a way to like see if his assistant or accomplice is still alive underneath the water, but like just a couple of bubbles of last oxygen,
Oh,
boom boom boom, and then after that he's like, oh, and then he has this like remorseful face, right? It's not like he's like, whatever. He kind of accepts that his accomplice died, um and then he rose away. It's like, all right, cool.
it is what it is.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. That seems a bit unreadable, especially if you
Well,
introduce your character like that.
but the thing is that like it's like, what are you gonna do? Like like this monster just
Oh yeah,
ate,
the monster died. Yeah,
like the
yeah,
monster
yeah.
just literally ate your. He's a huge monster. He went underneath the water where you can't really like you as a human can't really do much.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh,
and
and that's why he needs a new assistant now.
that's
It's
why
a
he needs a new
dangerous work.
assistant. It's a dangerous world. Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, sure, he
very
could have
brutal.
done more, but like, I don't know. That's a small thing. It's like that's
Yeah.
whatever. But yeah, the big thing was the whole like. I think mostly focusing on the antagonist. I think we both were like focused on the antagonist. And I think that's like the biggest change that can
Yeah.
be made to make this film more complex.
Right, because the antagonist makes the movie, right? Just like if it's a good antagonist, you understand their motivation, you understand why that character is fighting against them, you understand why the antagonist is doing their thing, right?
Yep.
Make them one dimensional is like, yeah, okay, but then like, what's the point of it? And everyone's just doing their own thing, and it's just a predictable story.
Yeah.
So I think that's why a good antagonist can make a very good story, and it's the reason why the story happens, right? There's the conflict, it's pushing back. It's the reason why the story exists. It's because there's a force that the character has to overcome.
Yep.
Right. So when you have a weak antagonist, right, then the story might not as hold up. When you have a strong antagonist, right, then not in terms of power, but in terms of just like who they are and their motivation, right?
Yep.
Then it makes the story more engaging.
Yep.
And just like you root for the character to overcome it and fight against it, and you root and win.
Yeah.
And you're more invested in the story.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So that's why I think we both focused on that main character. And then, but yeah, like, do you think Adelina herself should be in the movie, or would you have written her out?
I think her being there is fine. I mean, she was like the sort of conscious, like not conscious, but like agent of change for Sir Lionel Frost.
Yeah.
I think her being there is fine. I think her ending is good. Like
Yeah.
if her ending was like, oh yeah, blah blah blah, I forgive you, we're gonna make out and we're gonna be a relationship, I would have just been like, no.
No, right.
But I think that her being like a strong supporting character kind of like static, strong supporting character was fine. Makes Lionel Frost sort of shows him the error of his ways, and he is able to like take that in stride and change for the better. I
Yeah.
think her being there is fine. Yeah.
Okay. No, I agree. I think it was fine to her for be there, and I kind of again enjoyed her storyline and just how her story ended, right? Just not
Yeah.
together with Lionel Frost. I think it was fine.
Especially in your version of the story, like her being there is very important.
That that is true. That would be very true. Sure. But I think in the story, she's still, it was nice for her to be there. I think you're right. She was the conscious, right? It's just like, you should do the right thing. You should. She pushes, Lionel Frost to, to reconcile, or not to reconcile, just to help Susan and to help him, overcome his loneliness, and then pushes him to become a greater man than he is right now. And it opens his eyes to, he doesn't have to join this adventurers club. He could just, be his own self and do his own thing.
Yep.
And then at the end, she does her own adventuring and just doesn't get together because she wants to find who she is herself.
Yep.
Outside the adventures of, her own love interests and whatnot. So I thought that was fun.
Yep. Nice.
But she didn't really have much to do outside of that, I felt like.
Yeah, I mean, that's because she wasn't really too much of a dynamic character. It wasn't really focused on her. Like, she was a supporting character.
That's true.
So,
that's true. She's just supporting, right?
Yeah, her arc could have been like her arc was basically forgiveness towards Sir Lionel Frost. That was her arc. At the end, she forgave him. I think she accepted almost that they could be mutually they're mutually understanding each other. So, but yeah, how would you rate this film?
How would I rate this film
in its current state?
Yeah, in its current state. Yeah. I mean, I think we touched upon how the story was pretty simple and the characters were kind of one-dimensional. But I really did like the animation. I really thought that that stood out to me. I really appreciated it. And
have you watched any other stop motion films that Leica made?
Yeah. I mean, we watched Isle of Dogs, right? That was stop motion.
But no, Leica made, not
from Leica.
Not have you seen Kubo? Kubo and the Two Strings.
I have not seen Kubo.
Okay.
But I saw Coraline.
Coraline, okay.
That freaked me out.
Coraline is their most successful in terms of box office. Their first one, yeah.
I should watch Kubo. I heard that was really, really good. Have you watched Kubo before?
I watched Kubo.
Okay.
I was going to talk about Kubo a bit during my rating. It's part of my rating.
Okay. But yeah, I felt like the animation was beautiful and that kind of helped me. But again, the story was simple. It was definitely a family movie. I don't want to knock too much off of it just because it's a family movie, right? And but I feel like even if it's a family movie, it can still has some kind of complexity. I kind of actually liked all the voice. Well, at least Hugh Jackman. I thought he really put himself in the role. I didn't actually like Adelina, Zoe Saldana's voice acting. Sometimes I felt like it wasn't really all there. It just didn't really feel like it mashed, and I feel like she didn't really there wasn't like much emotion placed in it. I feel like sometimes I felt like she was kind of phoning it in, but maybe that's just because of the different medium. Because voice acting can be tough if you're not really on screen and doing some of the actions as you are in real life.
Yeah.
But I just felt like the voice acting for the character Adelina sometimes it just felt flat to me.
Okay.
The lines were okay as well. Sometimes they're slapstick, which I probably didn't really appreciate much. With the Susan's character, but other times I thought it was all right, interesting and understandable because again it's a family movie. So overall, I probably rate it. I'd probably give it a 6.5. I think. I mean, it's not
so barely below recommending it to general people.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like a terrible movie. And if someone asked me to watch it, I'd probably be like, yeah, you could watch it, but I wouldn't say like it's the best movie, and I wouldn't actively praise it. If someone wants to watch like a family film, like someone with children or kids, it's a movie you can enjoy and watch. But beautiful. Yeah, I really appreciate the animation, right? And so that might be something to look forward to as well. Stop motion and whatnot.
Yeah.
But like the story, the characters, the writing itself, and just the in general, just the movie, just it just kind of simple, flat, and I can see sometimes how it can be kind of boring, right? Just watching it through it, and whatnot. But overall, I think I probably recommend it to people with children, for families, but I wouldn't recommend it. Let's say because I really like animation, and I try to like I would definitely recommend like Toy Story and Pixar and films and whatnot. But this movie, I'm just like I'm probably not like say this is the forefront. Like I wouldn't put this in like my recommendation list for somebody unless they have like nothing else to do and just
Yeah, for sure. I would give this movie a 5, a solid 5. It wasn't a bad movie. It wasn't that great of a movie. I mean, I felt like I just watched it and I was like, I didn't really get much out of it at the end. Like I felt very meh. I felt very meh at the end. So I was like, yeah, that's a solid 5. In my book. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to anyone in general. Like, for instance, if you really want to watch a stop motion picture, just like that animation style, like from the same studio in general, like Leica, I highly recommend. I would recommend Kubo and the Two Strings More. I think the animation style is really well done in that movie, and also like the plot is more more interesting. In general, for me. Sorry, not in general for me. Just like for me, it was at least more interesting for me. And then if you're looking for like an action film, like an animated sort of just like action, not action, adventure comedy film. I mean, there is like a plethora of like other films that do a better job with this concept. Finding Nemo is one. Like I think Finding Nemo is a great film for that. Like that adventure comedy aspect is definitely there in that film. What else? I'm sure the Toy Stories do a good job of that too. A lot of Pixar films do a very good job with that concept. So that being like basically there's like whatever subcategory genre that you may have appreciated this film for, I think there are better films out there.
I agree. Yeah.
So, like I said, this film was just. I can understand why it's a box office flop. To be honest, I can totally understand, get behind that. Like in hindsight, like it's not surprising that it was a flop. So, voice acting was fine for me. I liked I liked Hugh Jackman and Zach Galifianakis. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce the last name. I'm sorry, Zach. I mean, you're probably not gonna watch this anyway. So, but for anyone who likes the character, likes the actor, I apologize for butchering the pronunciation of his name. But yeah, the voice acting was good, solid. I didn't. Yeah, I guess I didn't really critique much. I didn't really notice any major flaw with the voice acting. So it was pretty fine for me. Like I said, this is overall. I mean, the stop motion, the animation is very nice. Some of the settings, some of the picture. It was definitely the more redeemable side of the movie. That's for sure.
Definitely.
and the plot was just very standard, very textbook, very one dimensional. Villains were very one dimensional. I didn't like that. I just don't really like plots where the main antagonistic force is very one dimensional. And this one definitely was very one dimensional. So like you basically, as the audience, you basically knew exactly their whole spiel, their whole like plot, their all how they were going to affect the plot from the very get go. So it's just like, not very interesting in my opinion. So a solid 5, just a 5. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Cool. are there any last thoughts that you want to say, Austin? Any closing remarks?
Not really. I mean, yeah, I think we kind of covered it all. It's just, kind of a mediocre film. I think I like what you described, like it's kind of a textbook film in terms of like this is your characters, they're going through a plot adventure here and there, have a few character moments, have an antagonist just trying to stop them. It as you said, I think it really does feel textbook in the way that it goes about it. One thing I did appreciate was the joke about the Sasquatch, his name, his getting his name for the prospector is Susan, and Sir Lionel Frost just changes, like that's a girl's name. It's like, yeah, it's like, okay, that's fine. And I like how they stuck with it too throughout the whole, at least from the end. I like that. Like it was his choice, and he chose that name. It's like, yeah, that works, that's fine. And I really like that they did that. But other than that, nothing else.
I think this film would be a pretty good study in terms of like how to make what are the core elements of like a very like standard film, and how you can improve those, like make it more engaging, or sort of like elevate these standard plot devices to make it sort of just like more engaging in general.
Yeah.
I think this would be like a really good film for like a study, just like a
case
film,
study,
like a case study,
right?
a film study.
Yeah.
Just in general, because of how like textbook it is in a sense in terms of its plot, and also like it's how like how you can improve it and whatnot.
Yeah, it's like really flat. It's like nothing was like terrible, right? It's like nothing like cringy or terrible. Like why did they do But you just kind of wanted more from it, right? And that or it can add more to it to complement like his animation and what. Yeah, I agree. You're right. This could definitely be like a study or an exercise, right?
An exercise.
Say how would you do? What would you do to? And then we kind of did that, right? Like what would you do to make it better? Yeah. Have all the core characters there, but just like what would you change to make this movie
better,
more exciting,
better. Yeah, I mean, if I was taking the film class, and I was like, all right, we're in the lesson where we're gonna adapt screenplay from an existing film, and we're gonna make it our own. I think this one would be pretty good.
You show this movie or have them watch.
Have them watch this movie
as an exercise.
And then give it as an exercise.
That's a good idea. That's good. That would be good to do.
Well, the first question would be like, do you think this film could have been better? And if they say no, then I would have been like, you're failing this class. I'm just kidding.
Well, then you have to defend it, right? Have them defend it.
Yeah, you have to defend it. Yeah. But yeah, cool. With that being said, the film is about to end. Next week, 11 a.m. Pacific time, we are going to watch a film called Love, Simon. I'll update the schedule on the Twitch channel. But yeah, that's the next movie we're going to be reviewing. We have a YouTube channel called Yip a Trick on YouTube, where you can watch the shorthand versions of these VODs if you don't want to watch them on Twitch. I'll post the link in the chat right now. Check out our YouTube channel. And that's about it. I have nothing else to say. Austin, do you have anything else to say?
No.
Cool. Well, with that, I bid all of you guys adieu. Hope you have a wonderful day whenever you watch this, if you watch this, and we'll see you again next week, 11 a.m. Pacific time. See ya. Have a good one.
Bye.